to talk to you about sentences that aren't really sentences, so run-ons and fragments. This covers chapter 40 and 41 in your text, and some of you are having some difficulties, so let's go over it. So what is a run-on? Chapter 41 really covers this, and this is the problem that most of you are having, so this is why I wanted to start here. A run-on is a sentence that incorrectly joins together two or more independent clauses. So your next question, what is an independent clause? Well, this is a complete idea. A subject, a verb, often an object. It has a complete sentence, okay? So you need an actor or somebody who's doing it in your sentence, which is your subject, and they need to be doing something, which is your predicate, also known as your verb phrase. He threw the ball, right? He threw, if you just left it like that with the subject and verb, it wouldn't necessarily be a sentence because it's lacking the rest of that predicate sentence. She caught it. Great. So how do you identify these? Well, the first of them is lack of punctuation. You can just put the two ideas together, which is honestly the mistake that most of you are making. The next most common error here is the comma splice. Your book indicates that they're two different ideas, but really the comma splice is just a version of a run-on. He threw the ball, comma, she caught it. The comma by itself is not a strong enough break here. And finally, the linking adverb. You have a good idea here with the however, but it's not enough just to separate it with the commas. We're going to talk in a few slides here about what we can do next, but it's just not enough as it sits. Oops, what's happening here? Okay, so how do we fix these things? The easiest way to fix a run-on sentence is to separate them into individual sentences. Okay, he threw the ball, period, she caught it. This turns into really kind of choppy construction though. See Dick, see Jane, see Dick and Jane. You know, so there are more formalized ways to do this. You can use a coordinating conjunction, and, but, or, for, yet, so, or a semicolon within a single sentence. This is the chart that's going to lead you down the path of avoiding run-on clauses. You'll notice I have IND at the top. Those are independent clauses. So this is an order of descending break severity. The hardest break you can do for independent clauses is a period, followed by a semicolon, followed by a semicolon, transitional word, comma, such as however, moreover, therefore, any of these will work, a colon, a comma, and a coordinating conjunction. And as I said earlier, they're and, but, or, for, yet, so. He threw the ball, comma, and she caught it. Now looking at this example, no biographer can attest to the absolute accuracy in documenting the activities of his or her subject. This biographer of Cesar Chavez is no exception. The comma by itself is not enough. So, since this is an example with a comma and a coordinated conjunction, you can look through the samples here and identify that you can put an and before the comma, and that is the best solution. You can use a semicolon. He threw the ball, semicolon, she caught it. Now this particular sentence I wouldn't necessarily advocate using a semicolon, but it's meant to show you the example. Many people think taxes are too high. Consequently, some of those people do not report all the money they earn. Now you'll notice that the two independent clauses are highlighted for you, so you have to make a determination. How can I separate these effectively? We know that the commas around consequently are not sufficient. So the best answer here is going to be to insert the semicolon. You can use either one, but you can't use them together. They just don't play nicely. He threw the ball, semicolon, and she caught it is not correct. You could put a comma and or the semicolon by itself. Fragments, chapter 40. Fragment is an incomplete sentence. A lot of times I feel like you write sentences that are fragments because you're used to doing that in your email or your text messaging or something like that. There are three main types here that we want to look at. Prepositional phrases. This is covered on page 538 and 539 of your text, but any phrase that begins with a preposition, like after running through the woods, you need to have a comma following that phrase and then another independent clause, because a prepositional phrase like this is a dependent clause, meaning it needs something else. It cannot sit by itself. You can have a modifier. The modifier specifies the state of action of a subject in a separate clause. Studying far into the night in an effort to ace the SAT. Okay? It doesn't tell you who or what is doing this. So you're missing something. This is covered as verbals in your text on 539 to 541. It could just be missing some sort of major component, like a subject or a verb. Some of the pedestrians walking in the rain. Well, okay, what are these people doing? You're actually missing the verb here. If you wanted to use walking as your verb, then you would have to say some of the pedestrians were walking in the rain. You'd have to add in that helping verb. If you can't find a clear object and action, you are looking at a fragment. When in doubt, I'm just encouraging you to revise, right? Even if you're not positive, you'll probably improve your sentence through revision anyway. How do you fix these things? Well, you have to look for the complete subject verb. Pearl Buck, one of the most popular writers of her day, winning the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1938 for her novels about China. Well, what did Pearl Buck actually do? If you say that she won the Nobel Prize, or she wins the Nobel Prize, that's not what this sentence is indicating. And this is what gets really complicated about fragments. You read what you want to see rather than what's actually written. So, if you took out one of the most popular writers of her day, mentally, you just eliminated that, because it's separated by 2 commas, we can just take it out. Pearl Buck winning the Nobel Prize. Well, that doesn't really make sense either, right? We're missing that verb phrase. So you could change it, Pearl Buck won the Nobel Prize. The length of a sentence does not determine whether it's a run-on or a fragment. You could have a prepositional phrase that was 30 words long and still have a fragment. You could have a run-on that was 6 words long. So don't just go off of the idea, oh, well, this is a really long sentence, so I felt like I had to break it up. While that may be the case, it's not necessarily always true. Reading a sentence out loud may not work. Peter Elbow argues in his most recent book, Vernacular Eloquence, that reading aloud helps you tremendously. And I really want to encourage you to try this, because I do agree with him wholeheartedly. When you read something aloud, it makes more sense or less sense to you. You either love it, the way that it dribbles off your tongue, or you think, gosh, that just doesn't flow quite right. You can't always guarantee, though, that reading it out loud is going to tell you whether you need to fix this, and it's a fragment or a run-on. Same thing with comma. A lot of people have this assertion that when you need a comma, you'll pause. Well, it just doesn't always work out. That's why we have these rules, and that's why I'm trying to impart these to you accordingly. So, that's the presentation that I have about run-ons and fragments. As I said, it's probably the most critical error that you as a class are committing right now, and so certainly I want to figure out how can we move beyond this, how can I help you, and please feel encouraged to ask any questions that you have.